It is 6 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order and announce that a quorum is present. First up, we have the discussion of the regular agenda items and consent agenda. So let's go ahead and look at, we've got a public hearing number 1.
We will ask Mayor that we continue that to the next meeting.
Thank you, City Manager. We have consent agenda, item 2. Item 3. Any questions on item 4? Item 5. And item 6. Regular hearing, we have item 7, which we are going to continue.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Item 8, I have a summary of appointments from our city secretary. So what I think, in the interest of time, I'll read off each board, make sure everybody's okay with that list, and then we'll just ask for to move as presented, if that works. If it doesn't, then we'll have a conversation and go there.
Sounds good.
Super. And then item 9, and that's resolution to continue. Any other comments or questions on the consent agenda and regular items? If none, we will go ahead and move into workshop item B, overview of the 87th legislative session. This will be presented by the Director of Communications and Tourism, Mr. James Kunke, along with City Consultants Brandy Bird and Bert Solomons to conduct a presentation for City Council consideration. Of course, none of this would happen without the indomitable Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we do have Brandy Bird is with us in the chambers, and will be leading the presentation. Bert Solomons is joining us online, and we'll have comments as well. This morning I had the pleasure of attending the TML legislative wrap-up in Austin. And just a couple of numbers for you, because we have some numbers people on the council. There were almost 7,000 bills filed this session in what was supposed to be a slow session. And of those 7,000, more than 2,100 of them affected city government in some way. At the end of the day, about 1,000 bills, 1,075 bills passed, and about 1/4 of those affect city government in some way. So in some ways a quiet session, but it was certainly very busy, and there's a lot of activity going on, some good, some challenging, and we're going to let Brandy and Bert walk you through some of those key elements.
James, thank you, Mayor, Council. Appreciate you having me here today. So again, I'm Brandy Bird, and we've got Bert Solomons on the Zoom. So Bert is joining us here as well. And we're gonna really cover just the most critical bills that passed or that were contemplated this legislative session. We couldn't possibly cover them all, as James just articulated perfectly. But we do want to give you a final legislative update on all the items that were of importance to the city of Louisville. So the most critical issue that we dealt with this legislative session was destination sourcing. House Bill 4072 by Representative Morgan Meyer. He was the chairman, or is the chairman, of the House Ways and Means Committee. This particular bill would have gone beyond the comptroller's rule. It would have converted all sales tax sourcing that's not on-site sales to destination. So there's a wide range of analysis and impacts that would show the impact to the city of Louisville for this bill, but somewhere in the range of $10 million per year is the impact that has been contemplated. So this was our #1 priority, obviously, because of that price tag. And so we worked very closely with Representative Parker, Representative Beckley, and Senator Nelson to ensure that this bill did not get scheduled for a floor vote. So it was pending in the calendars committee, and that's where it remained. And we really focused on that effort. And then if it had been scheduled for a floor vote, we worked very closely with the representatives on amendments that would mitigate those negative impacts to the city of Louisville.
Randy, I might just add, I had a conversation with Representative Beckley, and she told me certainly this issue is not dead, just this session perhaps, and that there will be an interim study done, and they'll be looking at this for the next session.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you, Donna. I was going to mention that as well. Certainly, this is a priority issue for the Chairman of Ways and Means. We certainly expect it to come back next session. There's also some legal challenges that are being contemplated by the city of Coppell, which is one of the hardest hit cities, and some other impacted cities as well. So there's lots of activity happening on this issue over the interim. And Bert, before I move on, did you want to add anything?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can.
Okay, great. Yeah, I believe that there'll be, from what I heard, that there'll be probably an interim charge on it. So Ways and Means is not going to drop it, as Brandy said, and it's probably going to be something where the city's going to need to keep track of is when those interim charges are heard this spring, probably.
Thank you, Bert, and feel free to interject as I go through this. So the next issue that we wanted to touch on for you is broadband. Broadband, I know, is an important issue for council. It was a priority issue that you talked about in your legislative agenda. There was a bill that passed this session, House Bill 5, by Representative Ashby and Senator Nichols. It was signed by the governor and was effective June 15th. So this bill doesn't provide direct funding for broadband expansion across the state of Texas, but it does create the infrastructure and puts that in place so that if federal funds come down the pike for broadband expansion, then the state will be prepared. So it really creates a statewide broadband office that will be in charge of the planning for the state of Texas, identifying the gaps in broadband service. There was a lot of discussion amongst legislators that this is not just a rural issue, that it's very much an urban issue as well, and that there are gaps in the urban areas that need to be filled as well. So this bill would create that infrastructure so that when federal funding does come, if it comes, then the state is prepared and has a fund set up outside the Treasury to accept those dollars and allocate them, and has a statewide plan of where the gaps exist in broadband coverage. The next issue that we wanted to touch on is annexation. This was a priority issue for council as well. I'll be very brief on this. There were several bills that affected strategic partnership agreements, but none that impacted the Castle Hills agreement. This was just an issue that we monitored very closely to ensure that there weren't any impacts to the planned Castle Hills annexation. And please, y'all feel free to interrupt me and ask questions as I go along if you have any on any of these issues. The next issue we wanted to touch on is criminal justice. There were quite a few criminal justice bills this session. And as James said, the way that this session started out, we expected it to be minimal, that there were going to be minimal pieces of legislation filed and even less that would pass. And that is not the way the session turned out. Certainly the way it started, but it's not the way that it ended. And so it was a very active session for your lobby team and for the city of Louisville. So the first criminal justice legislation that had a lot of momentum behind it was House Bill 88 by Representative Thompson. It's the George Floyd Act. Our own Senator West from Dallas carried this bill in the Senate as well. The bill was heard in House committee, but it did not advance any further in the House. And on the Senate side, the Lieutenant Governor never referred the bill to committee. So that's basically a procedural action that declares the bill dead at that point. The other criminal justice bill that did pass this session is House Bill 1900 by Representative Goldman. This is the defunding law enforcement bill. So House Bill 1900 did pass. It is effective September 1. It does only apply to cities over 250,000 in population, so it does not impact the city of Louisville at this time. But of course, our fear is always that population bracket could be lowered, and so we want you to be informed as to what this bill does. So the way that this bill is structured, it allows the Criminal Justice Division of the Governor's Office to identify a municipality that reduces appropriations year over year for a police department, and then it establishes certain restrictions on that municipality. And it gives the governor's office a lot of control over this process. The criminal justice division of the governor's office actually has the ability to rule on an exemption if a city has reduced appropriations but for a specific purpose. Then they do have the ability to waive this requirement. But if not, if you are declared a defunding municipality, then there are quite a few penalties that are put in place. And those include a 10-year moratorium on annexations. It includes requiring the city to set the property tax rate for that year and 2 years after at the lesser of the no new revenue tax rate or the voter approval tax rate. It also requires the comptroller to withhold sales taxes for the year and deduct any cost of DPS providing law enforcement in your city for that particular year. So you can see there's significant impacts to that particular piece of legislation. Like I said, yes.
Just want to add one note on that bill. Of course, it's bracketed where it only affects really the 11 largest cities in the state for now. We're always nervous about bracketing. Probably the biggest hammer on those cities out of that bill is if they are ruled a defunding city, they would have to go back and identify every annexation for the past 30 years and go and hold elections in each of those annexed areas, allowing them the option to de-annex from the city. And you can imagine a city the size of San Antonio, Austin, Houston, the massive task that would be. And then you could wind up with a Swiss cheese look on your map if certain areas choose either way. So it's a big, big hammer for those 11 cities.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great point. Thank you, James. And like I said, there is a waiver process. They do account for things like capital purchases and disaster response. And there is an exemption in the bill that if the entire city budget is reduced by a certain percentage and police is just proportional, then that is an exemption and does not then consider the municipality as a defunding municipality. But as James said, there's some very strict language and there are severe consequences. The other bill that we wanted to mention is Senate Bill 1359. And so this particular piece of legislation requires a municipality to create a mental health leave policy for police officers, including the number of paid leave days that each officer is entitled to, and the types of events that would qualify that officer for that particular leave. Any questions on these bills so far before I move on?
And that second bill does impact Louisville, correct?
It does. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Donna. The next issue that we wanted to cover is the expansion of gun rights. There were several bills that touched on this issue this session. The most well-known, of course, is the constitutional carry or permitless carry bill, House Bill 1927 by Representative Schaefer. This bill did pass this session. It does allow people to carry without a permit. There is no expansion in the bill of the places where people can carry handguns. So that is, I think, a misunderstood piece of this particular legislation, but it does not require them to have a permit going forward.
Yeah, can I add that,
Yes, please.
can I add that cities can't prohibit it on city property either? The carrying of handguns.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Bert. They can prohibit, however, in a governmental meeting. So in a council meeting, you can prohibit in this format. There's also a piece of legislation that passed this session, House Bill 1069 by Representative Harris. This allows first responders to carry a handgun. It does not apply to the city of Louisville. It only applies to cities under 30,000 in population, but we wanted to bring it to your attention again for the bracketing that sometimes can be changed, of course, in the future. The next issue we wanted to bring to your attention is Senate Bill 22 by Senator Springer. It provides that a detention officer, corrections employee, firefighter, peace officer, or EMT who suffered from COVID that resulted in death or disability would be presumed to have contracted the virus during the course of employment. The bill is also retroactive, so it gives employees a year to resubmit claims if they were previously denied, or 6 months to submit new claims from the date of passage of the legislation. So that's just something we wanted to make you aware of so that you're prepared as those claims come forward.
Speaking of COVID-19, the cities now, effective immediately, need to come up with a paid written policies on quarantine leave now.
If that's correct, we made note of that from this morning. We have to have a policy for paid quarantine leave, I think 15 days for police officers, and that's something that we'll have to address.
And then elections was a big topic this legislative session as well. If you've read the newspaper at all over the last few months, you're fully aware of that. But this was obviously a very controversial topic this session. There were several bills that we were very concerned that were on our high priority list that did not pass. House Bill 35 and House Bill 664. These were both bills that were very much of concern, and neither of them passed. House Bill 35 was our highest priority from an election standpoint. It required that all debt, including refundings, to be voted on in an election and for that election to be held in November. That bill was originally scheduled for a committee hearing, and then due to opposition from members of the committee, of the Elections Committee, it was pulled, so it never received a committee hearing. Representative Beckley is on that committee, and we worked closely with her on that bill. And then House Bill 664 as well. It was sponsored by Representative Landgraf. It was heard in committee and then was never voted out. So that gives you a feel for how far in the process those two particular pieces of legislation went. And then, of course, Senate Bill 7, which is the one you've probably heard the most about. It was a priority of the governor. It died in the last final days of the legislative session because House Democrats walked out and they did not have a quorum, and so it could not move forward. This is an issue that we expect will come back in the special session at some point this summer or fall. Property taxes is an issue that had a lot of action this legislative session as well. House Bill 1869 was a priority of council. We talked about this the last time that we were before you a couple of months ago. This bill was authored by the chairman of the House Calendars Committee, so it had a lot of traction. I will say, though, in its final form, and this is a bill that James worked closely and we did as well, and TML was very active on this bill as well. But it was watered down significantly in its final form. There are a number of exemptions. It pretty much exempts everything that the city might move forward with. The exceptions are debt approved at an election, self-supporting debt, debt for any infrastructure, which is defined as a facility, equipment, right-of-way, land for streets, sidewalks, parks, landfills, parking, airports, telecommunications, cybersecurity. The list is long. Water and wastewater projects, police and fire. So they really have passed this piece of legislation, which obviously is a red meat issue for some members, but in practicality for council, I think it will have very little impact.
And the impact, council, would be we could not sell certificates of obligation for parks unless we did it against the 4B fund.
Yeah, can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes.
Oh, okay. There were, that having to do with debt financing. That the bill came out okay for cities. It's not great, but it's okay. But as far as property taxes are concerned, there were just a whole bunch of bills involving property taxes, appraisal processes, deferral of delinquent tax payment bills. What really was going on was a reduction of tax revenue for cities. But the appraisals themselves in this hot market we have are going to be higher. But the general scope of a lot of these bills had to do with really reducing tax revenue for cities. And for example, there's a bill involving market value in historic districts for residential properties. I mean, they're just micromanaging property taxes and debt financing and in several other areas as well. But it is it was amazing how many bills in the context for this legislature to actually go to micromanaging and trying to reduce tax revenue. We've already been through a lot of that, and they were trying to, even so, by separate different bills involving exemptions, property taxes, sales taxes, just trying to reduce the revenue stream that cities rely on to be able to conduct business. There was a lot of that going on this legislative session.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Bert. Thank you. And it really builds on SB2 from last session. I mean, you can see that philosophy certainly continuing in all of these pieces of legislation. Virtual meetings was a hot topic this session as well. Obviously something that the city would have liked to have seen continued, but both of these bills that were authored in the Senate and the House, neither of them passed. The House bill passed the House, and then when it was received in the Senate, it did not get referred to committee. So again, I mentioned that earlier, but it's a procedural action by the Lieutenant Governor to kill a bill. So virtual meetings will not be allowed to continue past the governor's disaster declaration when that ends. And then community censorship. This is the prohibition on taxpayer-funded lobbying. This was a priority of the governor and the lieutenant governor. Senate Bill 10 by Senator Betancourt passed the Senate. It was voted out of House committee and scheduled on the House floor, but never had enough support, and so continued to be postponed 6-7 times in the final days of the legislative session. So this is an issue that did not pass. The bill had really been substituted for a watered-down version in its final form, more of a transparency bill, which Louisville already meets all of the provisions of the final language of SB 10, but it did not pass. So this is an issue that we do anticipate will come back in a special session at some point this summer or fall. And then the hotel motel tax. This was an issue that came up that was somewhat unexpected. House Bill 2172 by Representative Morales was an expansion, a countywide hotel motel tax bill that was on the House floor, and Representative Stuckey, at the request of Denton County, added an amendment that would have put a 2% hotel motel tax across Denton County. So it was an additional 2% on top of the tax that already exists in the city of Louisville. We worked very closely with the Denton County judge and with Representative Stuckey to express concerns, as did Frisco and the city of Denton. And so eventually the judge made the decision to pull that amendment and worked with Representative Stuckey to do so. And then the last and final issue that we wanted to cover is transportation. I'll cover this very quickly, but there were several new funding source bills for transportation that passed this session. It was actually a very successful session for transportation. Again, we expected there to be minimal activity, and the end result was actually the opposite. So House Bill 2219 by Chairman Canales and Chairman Nichols, so the House and Senate Transportation Committee chairs. This bill reauthorizes bonding, so it reauthorizes TxDOT's ability to bond out of the Texas Mobility Fund. That creates $3 billion worth of capacity for new transportation projects around the state. And the significance of this bill is the Mobility Fund is one of the few funding sources for transportation that's not constitutionally dedicated to roads. So it can be used for public transportation, airports, ferries, freight, rail, lots of projects that don't currently have funding because all of the state funding is constitutionally dedicated. So that was a very big win for transportation, important piece of legislation. And then there were two other funding bills for transportation that passed this session. HJR 99 allows counties to form transportation reinvestment zones. So basically to create a zone around a particular transportation project and use the incremental increase in property taxes to fund the transportation improvement up front and then pay back over time. That is a constitutional amendment. So we'll be going before the voters in November. So that's something to look for on the ballot come this November. And then there were several electric vehicle registration fee bills that were authored this session. None of them passed in the final days. The Senate bill that was moving the furthest died on the House floor. But basically, these bills would have implemented an additional registration fee for electric and hybrid vehicles. So for electric vehicles, it was $200, and for hybrid vehicles, $50 a year. And the purpose of this is just eventually, electric and hybrid vehicles don't pay gas tax, and eventually, as those vehicles increase, our transportation funding will decrease, and so something has to be done at some point. However, the auto industry was very much opposed to this legislation, Tesla especially. They felt like the fee was too high. It would have been the highest fee in the country, and so this is a bill that I would anticipate will come back next session, most likely at a lower rate, which will be more of a compromise position to get that policy passed. And then the final funding bill that I wanted to mention was House Bill 4472. This is another funding stream for transportation that was passed this session. This bill takes excess revenue in TERP, which is the Texas Emissions Reduction Plan. It's a statewide fund that is in excess of $1 billion. That is very little is appropriated each session for projects. So it's a savings account, so to speak, for the oil and gas industry should EPA come down with any federal regulations that would require a state reaction. That's the way the oil and gas industry views that fund. And so it's continuing to accumulate, and it's getting what most people would say excessive at this point. And so this particular bill takes any unappropriated dollars at the end of the biennium or unspent dollars at the end of the biennium and transfers those to the state highway fund. So it's a small number right now, 87 to 170 million per year is what's anticipated, but that will obviously grow over time. So that was a big win for the transportation industry as well. Bert, is there anything you want to add before we talk about special sessions?
Yeah, if you don't mind. First of all, I want to thank the council and Donna and James and everyone for letting me do this on Zoom. But I wanted to point out that there were some other bills that sort of caught my attention, just a few. But they're requiring your city management team and your legal team to really pour over some of these micromanaging mandates by the legislature now. I mean, for example, there's a bill, House Bill 1475, which changes the Board of Adjustment Authority. And you guys deal with, the city needs to deal with the Board of Adjustments for various things. And the bill sort of micromanages that to the Board of Adjustment. This cybersecurity now is required training by government entities. There were a number of purchasing bills, public work contracts, retainage, construction, civil work projects, energy boycotts, SB 13, about cities over 100,000 not doing business with companies that boycott energy companies. There's a lot of micromanaging, a lot of bills, and the city management team and legal team are going to be needing to pour over that, because some of that stuff is actually effective immediately, and a lot of it goes into effect September 1. I'm sure James knows almost all of this. But the idea that there's just so many of these bills now that are going to require some real thought process about how you're going to conduct business. There was a lot of that this session, a lot of micromanaging. That's all I really kind of wanted to emphasize.
Absolutely. And we would expect that theme to continue in the special sessions as well. So the governor has promised 2 special sessions at this point. We're expecting one in July and then one in the fall, September, October timeframe. So there's a number of issues that either the governor has already committed to or have been discussed. Of course, redistricting, that is very important to legislators, not to anyone else, but very important to the legislators themselves. That's the redrawing of their districts. Bert has lived through that process, so he can certainly add to that, but that will be the most important topic to the members in the fall legislative session is what we anticipate. They have not yet received census numbers for the state, which is why redistricting is required in a special session. And then the appropriation of the almost $16 billion in ARP funds that are coming to the state of Texas. As you can imagine, the legislators obviously want to have a hand and how those funds are spent and how they're appropriated. So that will be a big issue in the special sessions as well. And then there's a number of issues that were priorities for the governor that did not pass this legislative session that we would expect will be on a call for a special session at some point, either in July or this fall. And those include a bail reform, election integrity, critical race theory ban, social media censorship, and then of course the Article 10 funding. So this is the governor line item vetoed the appropriations for the state legislature in retribution for the elections bill not passing. This particular line item veto doesn't begin until October 1 because it's within the next fiscal year. So technically, if the legislature were to meet, convene, and reauthorize that funding in a special session before October 1, then there's really no effect and no one misses a paycheck, because that really affects the legislative staff more than it does the members. So those are the issues we really anticipate coming up this interim. I think it's going to be a very active interim with a lot of special sessions. So we will certainly be working closely with James and Donna and your staff team to make sure that all these issues are covered. Bert, is there anything you want to add?
Well, I forgot to mention there's a number of police bills this session involving policy changes too. And I forgot to mention that before. I mean, for example, I wrote down, I just thought this was interesting. Police now need a real written policy in detail for the use of drones. And I'm not sure we use drones, but maybe we do. But I would anticipate the redistricting session to be primarily redistricting, and maybe some afterthought issues that the governor has, because I think the other issues that Brandy put forth are probably going to be dealt with in the first special session. I really feel that way. If anything doesn't really go well in that session, I think there's room in the redistricting session to deal with that. But the redistricting session, they don't even have the numbers yet. And so it's going to be kind of an interesting process about how long it takes them to actually get through that.
Absolutely. So I know we covered a lot in a very short amount of time, but we're happy to answer any questions of council.
I'll just real quick before we get to the questions, add one note about the Article 10 funding. Brandy listed there. It's the last bullet on the list, but it is the biggest bullet in this conversation. This is very much a balance of powers issue. You have the legislature, which constitutionally has appropriation authority, that is being defunded, essentially eliminated by the executive branch that has approval authority. Now, constitutionally, the legislatures are not going to go away. They're going to exist because the Constitution says they have to. Their staffs, however, are not constitutionally mandated. It would be equivalent to the Speaker and Lieutenant Governor getting mad at the Texas Supreme Court and just defunding the Texas Supreme Court or defunding the governor's office. So it's very much a balance of powers issue. There won't be probably a lot of public fighting, but there's going to be a whole lot of backdoor discussion about that particular issue. That's going to drive a lot of the agenda in that first special session.
Absolutely. I think it will be a little more public this time as well. But yeah, I think from what I've heard, a lot of legislators, both Democrat and Republican, are really upset about this. I mean, that is a balance of power issue. It's unprecedented for the governor to do something like this over the ability to make a quorum or not.
Absolutely. A lot of people would argue that it's a quid pro quo, and so there will certainly be constitutional challenges to this particular action. I think that's what Bert's referring to when he says we expect it to be a little more public than what some might think. So, other questions from council?
No questions, plenty of thoughts.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me today, and I know Bert does as well. He appreciates being able to participate by Zoom.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank the whole team. I mean, it's a tremendous lift, especially with COVID and having to deal with such a unique session. And of course, I fully expect the same level of detail as we go into multiple special sessions. So thank you all again for your time and going over and above.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
right. Workshop item C, discussion regarding annual pay plan market analysis. Our Director of Human Resources, Matt Griblianis. Matt, I'm so sorry. How many syllables do I need to put in there? I think I added one.
That was good.
Okay. He's going to conduct a presentation for council consideration.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. So this evening, I really want to go over a couple things. One is to talk about our pay plans, but another is our annual salary survey. And so I want to go through what the process looks like when we do that each year, the results of that survey, we just completed it recently, and then what our recommendations are for the upcoming fiscal year. So a good place to start is talking about how our salaries are determined. So how do we decide where the different jobs are going to fall on the pay plans? What we use is called the point factor analysis. What that does is it takes a look at the knowledge, skills, and ability that's necessary for that particular position. We look at different things such as the education, how much education is required for that position, or the number of years of experience. It'll look at, does this position supervise? How much guidance is needed for that position? The human relation skills, do they interact with the public and at what level and what end? So we do this for any job that's unclassified, and what that does is that gives us consistency in our pay plans. So the other part that we do to it is when we look externally. And so we do, based on an administrative directive, HR does an annual salary survey, and it's where we reach out to other cities in the Metroplex to make sure that we're competitive with the jobs that we have today with the rest of the market. In that, we're part of what's called the Metroplex Survey Group. It's made up, including Louisville's 15 different cities in the Metroplex. What we do is we share different salary information. So we've got, base salary, we look at job descriptions, we look at the benefits that are offered to employees, and that helps us when we need to adjust the market. This slide shows the different cities that are part of that survey group. Flower Mound, Grapevine, and Capel, they're not actually part of that Metroplex survey group. However, since they're our neighbors, it's important that we find out what they're doing. We're all competing for the same applicants and employees. It's important that we're competitive, one, to retain the employees, but then to attract them as well. So the different pay plans we have at the city, we've got a professional pay plan, an administrative, clerical, and technical pay plan, and then the trades. On top of that, we have what's called the broadband pay plan, which that's made up of your managers and your directors. We take a look at the part-time positions. Historically, we've looked at part-time positions when if we've had troubles filling the position or we've had a lot of turnover. An example of that is with our lifeguards. And so we've just increased the lifeguard salary or the rate of pay from $10 to $13. So we had that need to fill those positions. All cities were dealing with that this year. What we're looking at going forward is including these regular part-time positions in our regular survey. We'll probably look at that every other year. And then with appointed positions, so your city manager, city secretary, city attorney, and our municipal judge, we do a separate survey for those positions. That survey is on the street right now. We should have a response back to you in July with the outcome of that. So when we compare pay plans, what we're looking at in each of these pay plans that's listed up here is we use benchmark positions. And so the reason we do that, we want to look at positions that we have that are going to be a good match to the other cities. And so you can see an example here for the professional pay plan. We've got accountants and we have librarians. We have those positions, most other cities have those positions, and what the responsibilities are very similar to one another. And so it's a good apples to apples comparison. Now when we actually do the analysis, what we're looking at in these pay plans, they have salary ranges. So we compare the midpoint of our position to the midpoint of the other cities, and we look at the 50th percentile. So take a librarian, for example. We look at our librarian, what is the midpoint that we pay that position, and then we compare it to the average of all those survey cities that we listed. And so we'll see percentage-wise if we're above or below the market. When we're looking at all the different benchmark positions within the pay plans, once we average those together, then we can get an idea of where our pay plan compares to the other cities. And with that, we can make the decision, do we need to recommend an increase in a particular pay plan for that year? So some years we do increases, other years we don't. Now, if we do a market adjustment, that'll happen typically on October the 1st. And what happens normally is we move just the salary ranges for those positions, and the employees don't move with them. If an employee falls below that new minimum, we will bring them up to the new minimum October 1st. If you recall, though, what we did back in the spring when we did that mid-year adjustment, we did move employees with the market. It's a little more expensive to do that, but what that helps with is compaction. And so what compaction is so if we do a market adjustment each year and we move the plan 1 or 2%. So if somebody's getting a merit increase of, say, 3% each year, that salary range, that minimum is chasing that employee. And so somebody can work here for 3 or 4 years, and then we hire somebody today, and that new hire is making almost as much as that employee who's been here for 3 or 4 years. And so that's compaction. And so every few years, it's important for us to take a look at what would be the cost of moving the people with the market. And so we'll start doing that as well. So this shows the results of our survey this year. Remember, so this past year we weren't able to do merit or market adjustments until mid-year, where we did just that market and we moved the employees with that market. And so our survey results look pretty good this year. As far as our professional pay plan goes, we're just under 0.75% of where the market is. Our administrative, clerical, and technical, we're almost a full percent above the average, and then on the trades pay plan, we're just about a percent above the average as well. So as far as these pay plans go, we're sitting in a good place. As far as merit increases go, merit increases are approved by City Council each year. So again, this past year, we weren't able to have a merit increase due to budget restrictions. However, normally you see around a 3%. I've seen it a little bit higher, I've seen it a little bit lower. But what happens is if an employee is meeting standards on their anniversary date, then they would receive that 3% or whatever approved amount increase they would get. So that anniversary date is based on their date of hire or when they were promoted last. Police and fire is a little bit different. So we actually, when we compare to other cities, we look rank to rank. We compare to the top steps. So they don't get merit increases, police and fire. They move steps. And so they have step increases each year on their anniversary date. So the city of Louisville, we have 7 steps for police and fire. Some cities have 7, some have 10, some have 15. And so what we do is we compare to that top step. We used to call it, what we were called was a lag city. So when we would do the survey, we would say we were 2% behind. What we would do is we would bring ourselves up to market October 1st, but as soon as we moved our pay plans, every other city moved theirs too. And so we were always lagging behind. So to combat that, what we did back in 2016 is we added 2% on top of market. And so that helped us become more of a lead city. In 2018, we actually did market plus 3% for police and fire. And again, that helps us stay in front of the other cities. So this is our results from this year's survey as far as police officers go. So you can see we're 2%, a little more than 2% over the market. And again, it's looking at the top step at the 50th percentile. And so we don't even have to get to market this year, but my recommendation would be to consider a 2 or 3% increase, again, to continue being a lead city. And the same thing with the fire department. So we're 2.34% above the Metroplex as ffar as our firefighter pay goes. And so let's stay ahead of the market and look at a 2 to 3% increase for the fire department, as well, not just the firefighter, but the other ranks as well. The next 2 slides, I like these. This is a good visual. So this is for a police officer. And what this is showing, these are all of our survey cities. In the green, that's the survey average. So that's the average of all the cities of where a police officer tops out. That yellow, that's where we were before the mid-year adjustment. And the blue is where we are today. So you can see that 3%, how far that moved us up. In that pinkish red color, so that's when we're recommending that 2 or 3%, that's where we would end up with that increase. Now remember, October 1st, we're not going to be the only ones moving. Last year, most cities, the police and fire did move steps, but they weren't doing market adjustments. There was only about 4 or 5 that did. When we spoke to y'all in the spring, there weren't a lot of cities doing it. Since we did that mid-year, there's been a few more cities that have made adjustments like we did as well. But more than likely, most cities are going to be making moves just like we are October 1st. So the same thing for the fire department, for the firefighters. The green is that survey average for the cities. The yellow is where we were before the mid-year adjustment. Blue is where we're at today. And then that pink is that 2 and 3% if we were to do that October 1st. So now if we do a market adjustment for police and fire, those steps will change October 1st. And so whatever step you're on, you'll have that adjustment of that 2 or 3%, whichever one we would go with. There are multiple police officers and firefighters that still haven't topped out at step 7. And so they would still be eligible to move up to that next step whenever their anniversary date is. When you go to one step to another, it's about a 4% increase. Just ran a quick report. It's about 67% of our firefighters are eligible to move up to the next step, and then 27% of police officers are eligible for an increase this next year. Upper ranks are a little bit different. So the upper ranks of police and fire, most of them just have 2 steps, and it takes them 2 years to move to that next step. So broadbands, again, broadbands, that's your managers and your directors on the pay plan. So we look at that the broadband pay plan about every 3 to 5 years. We compare it outside in the market, especially when we have an open position. It's important to see what are the cities around us paying, but we also pay attention to what we're paying internally to the other managers and directors, because we don't want to create any internal inequities. So we do look internal and external if we're having to fill an open position or if we're having to create a new one. Now, if somebody gets promoted from the inside, it's going to be at least a 5% increase from where they are into the broadband, because the broadband doesn't have salary ranges. It's salary by agreement. And so they'll at least get a 5% increase. And then they would get a merit increase that following year if they were performing. As far as the recommendations then for this next year, I'm not recommending any market adjustments as far as the general government pay plans go because we are in line. I am recommending a 3% increase or a 3% merit increase for the general government employees. So again, if we do just a merit increase and not a market, that will help with some of that compaction this year. For police and fire, we want to consider that 2 to 3% increase for police and fire in the different ranks in the department. And then the other piece, so we didn't move, all the police and the fire who are on steps, they didn't move steps this past year because of the budget restraints. So what we want to look at is, can we move the police and fire who missed out on their step? What would the cost be to move them October 1st to get them caught up to where they're supposed to be? And then allow for them to move up to their next step if they're eligible for one in that next year. So we'll be bringing those numbers to you before the budget retreat. So at this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
As Matt just said, this is an important presentation, Council, because it is what I will try to get in your base budget. As you know, we always try to get the pay package in the base, and that's what I will attempt to do. When you looked at those charts where he was moving that 2 or 3% market, those two comparisons, what you might see me do is put a 2% in base if I can't get the 3% and put the other on the unfunded list for council consideration. But that'll all shake out and how we put the budget together.
I have a question, man.
Yes,
for the sheet where you had the fire and the police with the comparison cities, could you go back and look at the previous? You don't have to go back on the go back and look at what their percentage increase was. Maybe 2020 might not be a good year, but maybe 2019. So we can see what percentage they increased from the previous year. So we can see if we're I just want to see what they've done in the past. I know we won't know what they do until October 1st for this one, but I just want to see for myself that we're in line with that 2 or 3% bump up. So whatever they were last year, just see what the percentage. I don't need to see what they're.
You want to see the increases the other cities get?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we have that. You know, we do this presentation.
I figured that's just an add-on. So.
We can get that for you, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll send that to all the council members.
Other questions?
Thank you.
As always, very thorough. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Item D, workshop. Update on fleet and facilities building construction and overview of First Amendment to the construction manager at risk contract. So we have our Director of Public Services, Mr. Keith Marvin, conducting a presentation for City Council. Those lights out front are looking really good, Keith.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to try to be brief on this. The reason I'm here tonight, this item is actually on the agenda for approval, the item number 4 on the consent. So I'm going to walk through this. Since some of y'all were not here to throughout the process that we've gone through, I'm going to kind of step back to the beginning of what we're doing and just try to rush through. And feel free to stop me if you have any questions. But so a little bit of history of the building that we're in. So the picture up there on the screen is our Fleet and Facilities building. Was built in 1976. It's 9,800 square feet, and we do maintain over 630 vehicles and pieces of equipment in that facility. So in 2014, we knew that we would soon outgrow this facility, and so we hired BRW Architects to do a facility study, an assessment, and a conceptual plan for replacement of the facility. At the time, that estimate was about $15.5 million. We chose not to include that in the 2015 bond program and made the decision that we would try to cash fund that facility. So fast forward 5 years to February 19th retreat, it was apparent that we were not going to be able to cash fund that. The cost of the facility was escalating really probably faster than the dollars that we were putting aside. So at that retreat, we were directed to come up with some other funding options. And so at the August 2019 budget workshop, we came and presented the concept of certificates of obligation to fund this facility. Council at the time said, yeah, we like that idea, go ahead and get us some more information, make some more progress. And so we did that. And at the 2020 council retreat in February, we had hired an architect, Kirkpatrick Architecture Studio, to update that 2014 study. And as part of that, the core group went and visited a number of facilities. That picture is our facility, but we went and looked at some of the state-of-the-art newest facilities, not only city ones, but private shops and everything as well. Part of that, we refined and completed that update of that schematic plan and presented that in February of 2020. And of course, the cost, as I mentioned, had escalated, and at this point it was $20.1 million for the facility. Just a couple of pictures here, and on the left, the blue shaded area is where our public services, the Stephen L. Backus Public Service Center is, and that top left building in that picture, that blue shaded area, is where that fleet building is today. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see the proposed location down between the fire and police training facility, and to the right of that, just off the page, is our wastewater treatment plant. And the facility will go right where the old animal shelter is today. Kind of a blow-up of the site itself, ample parking, fuel bay on the right-hand side, some covered parking in the back for some of the facilities' vehicles to protect those vehicles and assets. And then a blow-up of the facility itself. Ample bays for repair, both large bays on the right-hand side and on the top, and then regular vehicle-sized bays. Adequate restroom facilities, lockers, meeting space, training space, something that's been difficult to come by here for our staff in that small building. So we're really excited about the facility. So we did hire Kirkpatrick Architecture Studio in June of 2020. We did make a decision to go with a construction manager at risk contract, and that was based on the success of the Thrive facility as well as the last 2 fire stations that we did. And we also included Peak Program Value on our design team. They came on to assist us with the project controls and that CMAR selection process. So a little bit about CMAR. I mentioned it's construction manager at risk. We did issue an RFP in July of 2020, and that is a process where we use schematic drawings, beginning level drawings, where we solicit qualifications from different firms that want to participate in this project. We then shortlist it, we narrow it down, we interview some firms, and then we ask them to provide very specific information, including estimated costs on the facility. And then we negotiate a contract with the firm that scored the most points in the process. And that was Crossland Construction in this process. Bringing them in early allows us to collaborate with them, have their input as we finalize the design. So that initial contract, which City Manager Barron approved was $9,500, and it's just for pre-construction services. But that brings them on the team, and you know, it really makes the process much smoother. There's not a contentious issue. How did you understand the specifications? We work them out so that everybody understands on the front end. And then Crossland goes out and they bid the subcontract work. Tracy, our purchasing manager, as well as PPV, are involved in that bid review process. So everything gets bid, and then they develop a guaranteed maximum price, and they bring that to us for approval. Typically, that would be an amendment, and there would be typically one amendment to that CMAR contract. Just real briefly, kind of where we are in the process. So the architect is working to finalize the 100% drawings. We still need to demolish the old animal shelter building. There's an engineering site plan and a plat going through the approval process. You'll probably see those come to you later on. As I mentioned, we've awarded that CMAR contract. What we have tonight is that first amendment, which consists only of a steel package, and then a second amendment, which will be the rest of that guaranteed maximum price for the full construction. We expect to be back in September of this year with that. We also need to hire a materials testing firm. We'll do that probably in September at the same time. And then, as I mentioned, certificates of obligation were sold, as well as utility revenue bonds have been sold to fund the project. So the facility, part of that 2014 assessment was how much of the facility is utilized by the utility operations versus general fund. It's about 25% utilization of the utility fund and 75% of the general fund. So that's the breakdown between the sale of the utility bonds and the certificates of obligation. So we're here tonight to talk about steel. It's just a layout view of the steel. There's quite a bit of steel in the building. So why are we doing this? Why do we break this piece off and come to you in advance? And the reason is because of what's happening in the steel industry right now. And it's mostly COVID, but it's also, you know, all sorts of things that are happening in the marketplace that are delaying the delivery of products and increasing the cost of products. I mean, it's all over the news. PPV, our consultant, they brought this to us and said, look, if you don't get a hold of the steel quickly, you might lose it, and it might take months longer to get it for your project. So we really recommend that you go out to bid early for the steel. Once you get that approved, you can be procuring that. They can do shop drawings. They can do manufacture and work on delivery while you're completing the rest of the bid process. So that's what we're doing here. We presented that to Ms. Barron, and she said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Go ahead and proceed. So thank you. They went out to bid, the contractor went out to bid on May 5th for pricing. Basically, getting it delivered saves us not only the time between today when we're here and September, but also that continuing increase in time that it takes to get the delivery of the steel, and then potentially the cost savings of that continued escalation. This flow chart has a lot of numbers on it, but it basically shows us getting the steel at the time that we need the steel in the construction process if we do it this way. You know, the guaranteed maximum price that includes only this steel manufacture and delivery is $816,503, and that is the dollar amount that's in item 4 for tonight. Continuing forward, they are finalizing that full bid set of drawings. That CMAR amendment number 2 would come to you likely in September. Construction then begins 4th quarter of this year, about 14 months construction time frame. We of course have to procure fixtures, furniture, and equipment that's separate from the construction contract. So we'll be doing that as that construction is going on, and then we'll move that in around the time we complete the facility. We do hope to have it where we can occupy that building by the end of 2022. And our full construction estimate at this point is $14,400,000. All of the additional costs that get us to the $21 million total price tag is all the design, the FF&E, and all those other items that go into the total project cost. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Keith, I don't have any questions, but I do just want to, every time we talk about this, I tell you how important I think this facility is. We really, our city services really rely on this facility being operational. And I just wanted to say, I think based on what's going on in the market right now, I think this is a really smart way to do this. I'm really, really glad we're doing this deal package right now.
Well, we appreciate it. We're very excited about the facility, and we really thank you for the trust and confidence that you put in us to fund this facility. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. All right, we are done with workshop, so we are going to go ahead and move straight into the regular session. We will have an invocation by Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Jones, followed by a pledge to the flags by Councilman Troyer.
Please rise for a moment of silent contemplation. Thank you.
Please join me in the pledges to the U.S. and the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
All right. Public hearing, item number 1. Continued public hearing, consideration of an ordinance pursuant to section 311.003 of the Texas Tax Code, amending tax increment reinvestment zone number 3, located south of State Highway 121 and Business 121, and being wholly located within the extraterritorial jurisdiction of Lewisville, Texas, by amending its boundaries and its benefits to the city of Lewisville and amending the project and finance plan for the zone. This item is being recommended that we continue the public hearing to the July 12, 2021 meeting. I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we continue the public hearing to the July 12th, 2021 council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you would please vote. All right, motion passes 5-0. We will continue that public hearing. Item D, Visitor Citizen Forum. At this time, any person with business before the council not scheduled on the agenda may speak to the council. No formal action can be taken on these items at this meeting. Speakers must address their comments to the mayor rather than to individual council members or staff. Speakers should speak clearly and state their name and address prior to beginning their remarks. Speakers will be allowed 5 minutes for testimony. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. Speakers attending the meeting remotely are asked to email their contact information for the record to citysecretary@cityoflewisville.com. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council is restricted from discussing or taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Action can only be taken at a future meeting. City Secretary, do we have any public comment? All right, moving on. Item E. Consent agenda. All the following items on the consent agenda are considered to be self-explanatory by the council and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so request. For a citizen to request removal of an item, a speaker card or e-comment must be filled out and submitted to the city secretary. City secretary, do we have any requests? City council, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you would please vote. Consent agenda is approved 5-0. Item F, regular hearing. Item 7, continued item, consideration of an amendment to the tax increment reinvestment zone reimbursement agreement by and among the City of Lewisville, the Lewisville Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Number 3, and Bright Realty LLC for project costs within Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Number 3, and authorization for the city manager to execute the agreement. Council, I'll entertain a motion to continue this item to the July 12, 2021 City Council meeting.
I move to continue the public hearing to the July 12th, 2021 council meeting.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Council, if you would please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Item 8, discussion and consideration of the appointment process to various city boards, commissions, and committees. So I think we'll just take these down the list, and alphabetically I think is how we have these set. So Councilmember Cade and I had the Animal Services Advisory Board, and on those appointments we're recommending to appoint Ronnie Cade to place 1, to appoint Britton Chapman to place 3, to reappoint Beverly Freed to place 5, and to reappoint Dr. Walter Legg to place 7. Are there any questions, comments? All right. Julie, should we do these one off, or should we, what's the easiest way to do this? Okay. Next up, myself and Councilmember Cade also had the Arts Advisory Board. We are recommending to reappoint Tanya Gandy to place 1, to appoint Jennifer Austin to place 3, to reappoint Nicole Francois to place 5, to reappoint Eric Bowman to place 7, and to reappoint Mary Hampton to place 9. Any questions, comments? All right. Third one is Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee, and again, myself and Councilmember Cade. We would recommend to appoint Sui Ling to place 1, to reappoint Chris Crawford to place 3, to appoint Lori Wilson to place 4, which is an unexpired term, to reappoint Kathy Stock to place 5, and to appoint Johnny Taylor to place 7. Any comments, questions? All right. Council, I think we are not looking to add appointments to the Louisville Housing Finance Corporation or the Industrial Development Corporation unless those boards need that at a future date. All right. Louisville Local Government Corporation, and this was Councilmember Green and Councilmember Troyer. Looking to appoint Ronnie Cade to place 1, reappoint Councilman Troyer to place 2, reappoint Councilmember Jones to place 3, appoint William Meredith to place 4, and reappoint TJ Gilmore to place 5. Questions? All right. Next up is the Park and Library Development Corporation. And this one we're looking to reappoint everyone that's currently on the board. The only one that might have changed was if Michael Pope had not been reappointed to Parks Board. Questions on that? Library Board, look to the recommendations from Councilmember Jones and Councilmember Meredith were to reappoint Raquel Maloney to place 1, reappoint Jennifer Marvel to place 3, reappoint Vivek Gupta to place 5, appoint Robin Swearingen to place 4, which is an unexpired term, and to appoint Marvin Jones to place 7. Questions? Oil and Gas Advisory is going to fall under that same, that we recommend no appointments to be made for vacant positions until such time as there becomes a need. Council members Green and Troyer on the Old Town Design Review Committee, we have appointment of Amy Puckett to place 1, a reappointment of Heather Cicerello to place 3, and a reappointment of Jack Tidwell to place 5. Any questions? All right. Parks Board, Councilmember Jones and Councilmember Meredith, appointing Angela Llewellyn to place 1, reappoint Sherry Brennan to place 3, appoint Kathy Falconberry to place 4 to an unexpired term, appoint Julia Sykes to place 5, reappoint Michael Pope to place 7, and reappoint Elaine Borchardt to place 9. Any comments, questions? All right. Planning and Zoning. These members also serve as Transportation Board, Capital Improvements Advisory Committee, and Brownfields Advisory Committee, and I-35 Overlay Board. Council members Green and Troyer. Reappoint Sheila Taylor to place 2, reappoint Alvin Turner to place 4, and reappoint Aram Ali to place 6. Questions? Comments? All right. TERS 1, Councilmember Jones and Councilmember Meredith. Reappoint Tamala Bowie to place 1, reappoint Tony Bowen to place 3, and reappoint Bill Peck to place 5. Questions? TERS 2, appoint William Meredith to place 1, appoint Ronnie Cade to place 3, and reappoint Kristen Green to place 5. TERS 4, appoint William Meredith to place 1, appoint Ronnie Cade to place 3. Zoning Board of Adjustment, reappoint Pamela Godwin to place 1, reappoint James Collier to place 3, appoint Rudy Durham to alternate place 1. Any questions on any of those? Comments? All right, now finally with Council Members Green and Troyer's recommendation for the Louisville 2025 Advisory Board to reappoint Tony Bowen to place 1, reappoint Robert Salete to place 3, reappoint Tamala Bowie to place 7, and to reappoint Marcelo Borges to place 7. Why do I have to place 7?
He should be place 9.
Place 9, thank you. Trying to catch me on that very last one. Any questions on Louisville 2025? All right, hearing no questions, you're gonna need me to read these all through one more time, or just as presented? Okay, we can do as presented. So what I'll need to entertain is a motion to appoint as presented.
Move to approve to appoint the board and commissioners as presented.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Council, if you please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Council, thank you for bearing with me on that and for all the work. I know there was a lot of phone calls and conversations out in the community. I want to thank everyone who has filled out a form and has expressed interest in serving on boards and commissions. There was a time when this was a very difficult process and we did not have people and it was like pulling teeth. I credit the Citizens University program with a tremendous amount of this, so thank you staff for creating that and driving that program. For those of you who maybe were not appointed this evening, please reach out to the city secretary, make sure that your forms are up to date and up to snuff on the paperwork, and we will make sure to keep you guys in the process because we do, while we do appreciate everyone's opportunity to be out there, we also want to make sure that we're getting new voices being heard and being involved. So there is plenty of opportunity in Louisville to participate. All right. Next up, item 9, consideration of a resolution extending the declaration of local disaster for public health emergency until 11:59 p.m. on July 12, 2021. On February 17, 2021, Mayor Rudy Durham, acting in accordance with authority granted to him under the City Charter and Code of Ordinances and under Section 418.108A of the Texas Government Code, declared a local state of disaster for public health emergency due to concerns related to COVID-19, the disaster declaration, which the Louisville City Council subsequently ratified, supported, and continued until 11:59 p.m. on June 21, 2021. Ongoing evaluation of circumstances related to the virus and the updated recommendations of the Centers for Disease Control and the Texas Department of State Health Services indicate that the conditions necessitating the disaster declaration have and will continue to exist for a period extending beyond June 21, 2021. The recommendation is that the City Council consider the resolution as set forth in the caption. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Council, if you would please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Reports. So these will be reports about items of community interest regarding which no action will be taken. In my continuing role to mix things up, it will be done in a round-robin format up here. But first, we're going to ask if our sustainability manager, Mindy White, would come forward. She has a brief report for us. And then following Mindy, we will lead off with Councilmember Cade and work our way from left to right.
Really is round robin. Thank you, Mayor. I didn't mean to cut in line in front of council.
No, absolutely. You guys go first.
I'm representing Chris this evening for Neighborhood Services, and he asked that I would let council and the public know that our PEP Property Enhancement Program funding has gone live, and we've started accepting applications. We have one project so far that's been funded. We just wanted to let everyone know about that and encourage folks to go to the website and search PEP or Property Enhancement Program in the search bar, and you can find out more information about qualified projects and how you can apply online.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Staff, any reports as we work our way across the front of the room? Nothing? Nothing? What's the lake level looking like?
We're at 526.19, so it's they're letting quite a bit out of the lake. So
They are putting a lot of water in that river.
Got the mayor.
All right. Councilmember Cade?
Nothing. I pass.
All right. Councilmember Meredith?
I'm going to kind of play Councilman Ferguson here a little bit. So get your Marsha Ball will be at Louisville Grand Theater August 14th. This is her second performance there. If you haven't seen her, I highly recommend it. A true Texas artist, born in Orange, Texas, and for those who haven't know anything about history, it's also Clarence Gatemouth Brown, was also from Orange, Texas. Raised in Louisiana, she's an American blues singer and pianist. She's played with the likes of Stevie Ray Vaughan and Irma Thomas, a regular at New Orleans Jazz Festival, won many blues awards, and has been named Pinetop Perkins piano player twice, if you know who Pinetop Perkins is. And she's included in not only the Austin Hall of Fame and the Austin City Limits Hall of Fame in 2018. So I highly recommend you get your tickets soon.
Thanks, sir. Councilmember Troyer?
I have one thing on a personal note. I was able to, a week ago, take the first vacation that I have taken in almost 40 years without making it a working vacation. So it was very enjoyable. And the one thing, I don't know if any of you are interested, but there is a very interesting museum in Houston on the north side called the National Museum of Funeral History. If you get a chance to go there, you will be impressed with what is in that National Museum of Funeral History. When my wife suggested it, I was like, I'm not sure about this, but it was very interesting. Anyway, I also have part of what Councilman Ferguson used to report here. Louisville Grand Theater performances. There will be a Beat Root Revival and Pat Byrne. This is presented by the city on July 1st. And of course, the acoustic jam does go on every Friday night, 7 o'clock. And that is presented by the Visual Arts League of Louisville. And if you've never been there, I would highly recommend attending that and participating even. Some activities that are going on: Yoga in the Plaza with Blue Anju Studios. This is Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pilates in the Plaza with Audrey, Thursdays at 6. Tai Chi in the Plaza with Lowell Johnson on Saturdays at 9:30 a.m. And then currently art exhibitions, Fiber Nation, Quilts by Barbara Olivia Hartman through July 10th. Common Threads also through July 10th. And United We Stand through July 10th. All of those are presented by the Visual Arts League of Louisville. That's all.
Thank you, sir. All right. We'll work our way back to Councilmember Green.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Councilmember Jones?
Sure, well, since Bob stole what I was gonna read this time, now I know what it feels like. I don't share the list that Councilman Ferguson, but we share hairstyles now, so there's that. June 22nd, our Sounds of Louisville concerts will be going on tomorrow with Itina Band. Come on out and come check it out. Next week, it will be Bitty Bitty Panda. So come on out and have fun. And before I let this go, I'd be remiss if I did not say this, and I know you probably have something to say about this, but our city manager has announced her retirement, and we could not decree that she could not do it. So I just want to thank her for all of our hard work, for all of her patience with us as city council members. At one point, I know we drove her crazy about something, but I just want to send her a heartfelt congratulations, and we look forward to keeping you busy and on your toes for the next few months.
Plan on it.
City Manager, you got anything to add?
I don't. Certainly, I did announce my retirement effective the end of January. It is very bittersweet for me because I love the city and the people, and I just feel very blessed that I've been able to contribute to this organization for 31 years. So,
Well, we thank you for that end of January 2025. Is that? No, no. 2020. Gosh, it's this next year. I want to say thank you. Want to let residents understand how the process is going to work, just so that we have some clarity out there. We have engaged a firm, a findings firm, that will go look through the market and bring us different participants to see who would like to lead this ship in the role of city manager. We will also be allowing and asking for folks who are interested within city staff as part of that. But part of that process will be that council will be interviewed, and each of us will be giving our input as to what we would like to see in a city manager. My data will be that we have an exact clone of Donna Barron, if the science is there. But with that being said, it is going to be a national search. Louisville deserves that. We are a great job to have. And Donna is leaving us in a position where we have a phenomenal staff that will be able to wrap that person into a great culture. So I'm excited for the opportunity that is coming for our city staff as well as for this council. I'm not quite as excited about Donna Barron leaving, but she has been a wonderful asset to me personally. Over the years, she's really helped me grow and understand the role of municipal government and how important it is that we continue to hold the line on government being functional and providing for the citizens and those who are here. And I think there's nobody that does it better based on my experience. So thank you so much. With that, I will move that we go into closed section in accordance with Texas Government Code Subchapter D, Section 551.072, Real Estate, Property Acquisition. We also have, do I have to read all three of these? I have to read each one of those? Got it. So Section 551.072, Real Estate, Property Acquisition, Easement on portion of 630 Willow Street. Section 551.087, Economic Development, Deliberation regarding economic development negotiations. Move to closed session. All right, we will reconvene into open session. Council, is there any action to be taken?
Move to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote.
sorry, we switched seats. I was already
Trying to confuse the public.
And we are adjourned 6:33 p.m.
Wow, 6:30. Wow. That can't be right.
Thank you.
8:13.
8:13. Oh, that's right. Yeah, no, I can't do the math. This thing says 6:33. What's that about? It's 8:13. There we go.